Are you listening? Damn.
And welcome back once again to the Endurance Hour podcast, episode 379. Back alongside Kona coach Wendy Mader, I'm Dave Erickson. Glad to have you with us for this episode. A good group of questions from our listeners and followers, so we'll get right to it, beginning with Ann. Ann writes, I was intrigued by your single sport run out of season plan on Training Peaks and wondered if you include strength training or do you offer an out of season strength training plan only, since you did stress the importance of strength training in the previous podcast I heard. Thank you, from Ann.
Hey, Ann, thanks for asking the question. And I actually have developed an out of season strength training program, but we haven't published it yet or done anything. So it's definitely something that's always on my mind, because I do think strength training is really important year round, not just in out of season, but specifically out of season focus priority is definitely a must. So to answer your question, no, we do not have a specific out of season strength training program yet, but hopefully we will in the future. And all of our programs, not just our out of season programs, do have a component of strength training. We have an actual program and we have recommendations, because not everyone has access to machines, dumbbells, free weights, cables. And so we kind of I call it a sample workout with the amount of sets and reps that you do each week and multiple times a week. And then I also will give suggestions if you don't have a lat pulled on machine, but you have a cable or a band, how to modify the workouts. And the Endurance Hour YouTube channel has Dave demonstrating most of the workouts that we do include in our plans on Training Peaks. I've done a few videos, but Dave primarily has so many videos of the movements. And so I've also tried to include YouTube videos within the program showing you how to execute a workout or a movement pattern.
And there's some reasons why strength training is important for triathletes. I'll name off a few. Wendy, you name off a few as well. One, injury prevention. It's the big issue for a lot of people who are going through their season is they always want to know going into a race, am I healthy? Am I injury free? So the value of injury prevention. What are some of the things that you focus on to avoid injuries? What are those strength training exercises that you do to strengthen certain parts of your body?
Yeah, so when I'm thinking strength training for injury prevention, I'm thinking of a lot of core movements. The area between your shoulders and hips, front and back, makes up your core, not just your abdominal region. So focusing on the hips, specifically the glute medius, is a weak muscle for most endurance athletes. And so there's a lot of ways to target that smaller muscle, that glute medius. And so, traditionally, most of us, maybe not, have heard of glute bridges or clamshells or monster walks with bands. You don't need to do all three of those because they target the same area, but you may do one movement pattern better than another. And so it's worth trying multiple ways to target those hip areas. And then definitely stretching your hip flexors, because they get super tight on the bike if you're a multi-sport athlete, as well as a runner, the hip flexors. And then the lower back's important. The abdominal region's important. And then the backs of your shoulders is really key, because we have bad posture from sitting. So it's important to open up the chest and strengthen those upper, as mid and lower back muscles that are still part of the core for injury prevention, because usually due to weak posture, and a lot of that's due to sitting all day, that could be a precursor to a potential injury that you may sustain while you're mainly running and or cycling or swimming. And then once you get those core stabilizers stronger, then I like to do more of the specific movements like squats, hinges, deadlifts, chest press, pull-ups, or some sort of upper back strengthening, as well as triceps and posterior delts.
And this falls under for better form and body mechanics on why you should strength train. For example, these are great for correcting imbalances in your body, better posture. You're sitting down all day, for example, if you are at a desk or those kind of things. Overall body alignment, which is when he's talking about with that running, you could be off balance a little bit. So the injury prevention aspect of weight training will help that achieve with consistent strength work and balance in your body. So better form and better mechanics. And there's also the increase of power. Wendy, talk about some of the things that you can do that will increase your power as a swimmer, cyclist, and runner.
Right. So when I'm thinking increase in power, I'm thinking like faster movements. So you can take the same kind of movements, like let's say the ones I just described, squats, deadlifts, presses and pulls that you do for pure strength training where you're lifting heavy weight. You may be four sets of 4 to 6 repetitions of heavy weight. You obviously don't want to start there. You want to progress up to that with lighter weight, higher reps, and then you increase the weight and decrease the amount of reps you can do. And then once your muscles are stronger, then you can kind of develop more power by pushing a heavy weight, make it a little bit lighter. You can push it faster because you're trying to go more for power, and that means faster movement of resistance. And you also, when I think of power, I think of plyometrics, like box jumps, certain running drills are plyometric based. Again, anytime you're doing like a jumping pattern of movement, front to back, side to side, it's more of a plyometric. Single leg jumps, I would consider plyometric based, and you're going to develop more power in your hamstrings, quads, and glutes, and that's going to transfer into power on biking and running. So you're looking at the strength training, the strength you gain in the weight room to transfer to outside riding and running. And that's why out of season's the best time to focus on that, because most of us are indoors in the out of season time frame, which is usually November, December, and January-ish.
And all these things will help you become more well-rounded, because you're looking to become, I know we're focusing on those 3 different sports, but by adding these strength elements, you strengthen the stabilizers, you're a better, more balanced athlete overall. And you're going to feel better too if you're a well-rounded athlete, not just someone who's running in a certain plane all the time or swimming in a certain direction or using muscles in a certain way without these, not accessory exercises, but things that work on the things that you don't normally use when you're running in a straight line or swimming freestyle for, hundreds of yards on end.
Right. And so we're recruiting more muscles. We're strengthening muscles to recruit when maybe the primary muscle is going to fatigue in your sport. You're going to have those stabilizers muscles to help a little bit. As one muscle fatigues, you have other muscles that are going to come into play to help keep you going forward.
Good question, Ann. Good discussion and some valuable information there for all of us. This one from Jason. How many events a month or a year do you usually do? And I think this is probably directed at you, Wendy. I used to do road bike racing, and I stopped racing a few years ago. We raced a couple times a month as a cyclist. In 2022, I decided to do a mix of events, including 5K, sprints, a 50-miler ultra, to see what I want to focus on. It's been quite hard to be training for both 5Ks and 50-mile races, which he knew it would be. I definitely know that I want to focus on triathlons next year because I do miss road bike racing. Any tips are appreciated on how you schedule out your year, or how many events you do, and what do you do to mix them up?
I got this question from Jason, and it reminded me of myself when I started the sport. So I was also I was a swimmer who turned multi-sport athlete, who also turned cyclist. So back in the late 90s, when I was at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, I was done swimming, but I still did multi-sport. But then I joined the CSU Cycling Club because I had a lot of friends on it. So I was also trying to balance the dynamics of road racing, criterium racing, which we raced like once a week, but trying to not just be a cyclist. I still wanted to train as a multi-sport athlete, doing 5Ks, Ironman races. And so I was kind of all over the map with my racing, but it also helped me decide where I wanted to put my focus. So after maybe a year and a half to 2 years of doing the cycling thing, I decided I don't want to be a cyclist. I want to pursue more of the multi-sport. And so I just want to focus on that. So I stopped doing cycling races because it's just a different type of training. If you want to compete, you have to train differently. You can't train as a triathlete, at least for me, and expect to perform well in a let's say a criterium road race. And so, currently after 30 years in the sport, I have been able to manage training for 5Ks and doing very well in them, as well as doing the ultra running and doing very well in that as well. But I've also been doing this for 30 years. I didn't start where you're
Hmm.
starting right now. And as he said, he wants to go into more of the multi-sport lifestyle. So generally, I like to maybe have two peak races, which are also called A races. So you have one maybe like at the end of spring, early summer, you peak, and then maybe you peak again in the late fall, early winter time to have another peak race, where those are the two events that you really want to train for, and then maybe have smaller events like a 5K half marathon as a B or C race, or just a more of a training event in preparation for that A race. And so you can still you race more than twice a year,
Hmm.
but they have a lesser important, lesser value. You can't, train specifically to peak for a 5K and an ultra marathon in the same month. You can try it. I've done it, but I've also been doing this for a long time. As a newbie, I don't recommend that. And also, we've talked a lot on the podcast about having a strong why, making sure you're clear about what your why is and what your goals are for each event that you decide to enter. Again, going back to when I first started triathlon, I would race every weekend, but it was a sprint. It was a sprint. And I think my second year in the sport, I built up to an Olympic, and that was a peak race at the end of the season. But I did sprints every weekend. And what I didn't know back then is those sprints were actual brick workouts. I never had considered myself to do a brick workout. I didn't really know what those were back then. But those sprints allowed me to prepare for the Olympic. And then my third year of racing, I did my first half Ironman. And so I did a few more Olympics, less sprint distances, and I didn't race every weekend. I raced maybe once a month, and it's usually a sprint or an Olympic. And then I did one half Ironman that year. And then as the years went on, I was able to do a couple half Ironmans, one Ironman a year. And then again, as more years went on, I've been able to manage doing two Ironmans a year and doing pretty well at them, but making sure they were spaced out and I had plenty of recovery before and after each one. So a lot of it just depends on your previous experience and what you want to get out of the sport.
Great question, Jason. I'm sure that probably answered it and then some. So good. Next question from Scott. What are your thoughts on cryotherapy? And then we can also bridge this off into cold water immersion. And I've got some information about cryotherapy. Wendy, you have any first
Yeah.
initial reactions?
So yeah, I was going to kind of defer to you, Dave, on this
Okay.
one with the cold water therapy. I have never done cryotherapy. I've only heard about it. I think a year ago, I ran into a friend of mine at the health club. He trains for ultras, and he told me about it. And so I've looked into it. I actually know where he goes. I ran into it in Woodstock, Georgia. I'm like, oh my God, there's a place that Phil goes to. And then since then, I've heard of other local athletes who also use it.
Mhm.
And that's about all I know. I haven't been to it. I've done some research, but I really don't have it on the top of my mind of the benefits of it. But it seems like a pretty valid thing to go to for recovery.
Well, it means cold therapy. It's a technique where the body is exposed to extremely cold temperatures for several minutes. I remember seeing some people walk into these stand-up um, chambers, and they have
Uh-huh.
their hands covered, their toes covered. They have a little beanie on, and they go in there for just a few minutes and come out, and then it's immediately when they get back out, they're fine. But I guess it's something you can do to just one part of your body. You can opt for the whole body cryotherapy. You can localize it in a number of ways, like ice packs, ice massage, sprays, ice baths. And then the theory is with the whole body cryotherapy, which I'm probably guessing what the question's about, is immersing the body in extremely cold air for several minutes. You could receive a number of benefits as a result. So you stand there in the chamber, you surround your body with, but it has an opening for your head at the top, I guess. I haven't done one of these things before. The enclosure will drop between 200 and 300 negative degrees. You stay in there, the ultra low temperatures, between 2 and 4 minutes. You can get benefits from just one session, according to this website, healthline.com, but it's most effective when used on a regular basis. Some athletes will use it twice a day. Others will go for daily for 10 days and then once a month after that. The benefits, I'm just going to do the bullet points here. They say it reduces migraine symptoms. It numbs nerve irritation. It helps treat mood disorders, reduces arthritic pain, may help treat low-risk tumors, may help prevent dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And there's also some skin conditions that it can possibly help with or treat, reduce inflammation as well. So I don't know if I should do a little cost, because I don't know how cost effective it is to do this. So based on the national average, the pricing, you can expect to pay between $60 and $100 for your first session, and that's just for a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. How long is it? Does it say?
2 to 4 minutes is what they recommend. But then if you buy more, you get better. But yeah.
You know, and ultimately, and I've said this before, when it comes to using something like this for recovery, you know, make sure your, you know, sleep and nutrition are on target for recovery, as far as, you know, you're prioritizing sleep, you're eating nutrient dense foods, and then add other recovery protocols to your regime. You know, so if you're going to invest in cryotherapy or something else, you know, first take a look at your sleep and nutrition for recovery purposes. But it sounds like it has a lot of other benefits as well.
Yeah, and the machines themselves start, you know, in the $40,000-$50,000 range. So the machines are not cheap and go even a lot higher than that. They, you know, one here says I think they're a cryotherapy machine business. It can be 72 grand up to, you know, way over that for some of these things.
Wow.
So it depends on how often you use it. I don't know anything about them on their warranties, but I do know more about cold water immersion with the cold plunge I got back in August. And I got that specifically because I wanted to get the best recovery possible leading up to Ironman Arizona. And for that, it was well worth the price. And the more you use it, I mean, the cost benefit, I mean, it pays for itself the longer you use it and how more often you use it. And the one I have called the cold plunge it's circulating water. It stays at that temperature all the time. Little top on it. I have it right now at 41 degrees. I started in the 50s. And then I started going a little bit lower to 47, 48. And then I went to 55 and went back to 50. And then I was listening to someone talk about doing it, whether it was Joe Rogan, and he was saying he was down in the 30s, not 32, maybe 34, 35. I don't remember how long he said he did it, but I was doing mine 8 to 10 minutes in the high 40s or 50 degrees. And that was probably too long because I had a real major shivering effect afterwards. It took me a while for my body to warm up again because it was so cold. But I wanted to get that recovery aspect, and it really helped. It went beyond just the inflammation or the recovery of the muscles. There's the circulation that it's helpful for, mood benefit. Your immune system gets boosted with this. I guess the mental part was because there's a resilience that you build up on dealing with being immersed in cold water for periods of time. That first 30 seconds to a minute seems like, the first shock is probably the hardest part because it takes your breath away. You got to work on your breathing, slow it down, and then just settle into it. Sometimes I have a little stand, like a phone stand that's suction cup next to it, which actually came with the unit. And I'll just watch something. And next thing you know, 2 minutes go by, 4 minutes go by. It's like, oh, I forgot all about it. And it helps. But the recommendation with the cold plunging or water immersion is 3 to 4 times a week for a duration of 12 to 15 minutes total. So you don't have to go in it like I do 8, 10 minutes at a time. You can just do it 4 minutes at a time. And this regular benefit is for me has made me feel better and calmer, less stress, and the recovery. I haven't had, on one hand, I can count the sore days following a heavy workout, but that's because I would always cold plunge after a heavy workout, day of. Go rinse off after a long bike or a long run, and then go in the plunge for 10 minutes or so. Sometimes I'll just go lower body. If it's just a hard run workout, that's what I'll do. And I've got some Blue 70 neoprene socks. Because, you know, if you're in 45 degree water or 50 degree water, your toes get numb and tingly. and that helps hold off some of that pain of being in cold water. But when I do this, jumping in the pool at the YMCA or Lifetime Fitness, their 60-degree water or whatever it may be seemed like no big deal. Whereas it was 3 or 4 months ago, it's like, oh, it's so cold. Did you get in the water? It's like, oh, this is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a mental strength you develop with whether it's cryotherapy or cold water immersion. That's like, oh, I can do this. This
Right.
stuff is easy. Once you get past a certain threshold, things become more doable. And that's, hey, you want to fall back on the Ironman logo and phrase. If you can do an Ironman, really, what can't you do? If you can handle that day and go through the ups and downs and finish standing up, wow, what a success. What a human success that is, that you can transfer into everyday life. And so in a way, the little cold water immersion is a success builder,
Oh, totally.
mentally, physically.
So
And
I got a quick question. I don't want to
yeah,
forget. The day that you described, took you a long time to warm up. You were kind of
yeah,
shivering.
yeah,
I mean, how do you warm up? I mean, do you put on layers of clothes? Do
yeah.
you go in a hot shower? Do you go in a
Nope,
sauna? What
no
do you do?
shower, no warm shower. That's one thing I listened to the Ben Hoff or Winhoff,
Wim Hof, yeah.
Wim Hof. Yeah, I was watching some of his stuff too when I first got the tub and prior to the
Uh-huh.
tub to understand about it, because he's all into the cold water ice
Mm-hmm.
baths. Is that and other people I've listened to is that you don't want to minimize the effect of the cold water by getting warm again in a hot shower or a hot tub. There is something called there's a transfer that you can go from hot to cold, and that can be a circulation building process.
Mm-hmm.
I made a video on that. I can't remember the words of it. Some sort of therapy, cold water transition therapy. But you want the cold water from the cold plunge to continue its effects of the lowering the inflammation. And if you go to get warm again, it kind of stops what it's supposed to be doing. So that shivering effect also, you're built, in a way, it's a very small amount. You're burning
Uh-huh.
calories because you're shivering. You're forcing your body to work to warm back up again.
Yeah.
So that's a positive. But yeah, I'll put wool socks on, sweatpants, a hoodie,
Mm-hmm.
sweatshirt, and walk around and stretch, air
Mm-hmm.
squats, something, move the body again, get the blood circulating again, is
Nice,
what I'll do
nice.
to warm up. But I find that if I'm 8 to 10 minutes or more, that's a problem because I'm in 45, 48-degree water,
Right.
and it just takes a while to get warmed up.
It's a fun challenge though.
It is, yes. If
And
you
just like that accomplishment feeling. Ah, I did it.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah. And it's just gonna fight through it and just weather through that first 45 seconds to a minute, and then it gets easier. And then you're like, oh, if I can do this, I can do it longer. If I can do 30
Mhm.
more seconds. There's a phrase, I don't know if I've used this with you or talked to you about this in the past. I don't know if it was Instagram or whatever it was, but someone was going through a hard time, and the coach was telling the athlete, the student, don't give up for one more day.
Mhm.
Don't quit for one more day. When someone's having a real hard time, whether it's training, whether it's getting back into doing what they're doing, it's like, how about you don't quit for one more day, and then we'll talk. For someone who just wants to give up, all right,
Mhm.
go one more day of not quitting, and then go one more day of not quitting. And next thing you know, you're back on track.
Right. I love it.
Don't quit for one more day. And I would repeat that phrase to myself
Mhm.
a few weeks ago. Don't quit for one more day. And if you can get past that, it's almost like a reset button. All right,
Uh-huh.
new day, new start. I'm out of that fog of negativity or frustration. Don't quit for one more day. And use Dave150, Dave150 at thecoldplunge.com. You can save $150 off one of these cold plunges. They give you a discount code. And it's also in our newsletter, which comes out Mondays and Thursdays or Fridays.
Yeah.
Next question. This one is from Jenny. So Ironman Florida is coming up very quickly. In the swim to Wendy, because you've done this just last year to qualify for Kona again, would you recommend a tri-short under your wetsuit with complete change in T1 or a complete change? What's your routine there with post swim or in
Well,
this?
I think this is a good question that definitely applied to me that I just had a discussion with an athlete I coach who's doing Ironman Florida. And Ironman Florida takes place on November 5th or 6th. I can't remember if it's Saturday or Sunday. So it's coming up. And so, last year when I did it in 2021, it was unseasonably cold. And they had this cold front move in. It started to move on Thursday, which is so the race was Saturday. So it started to move in Thursday. We went to rack our bikes and all the bikes were coming off the rack. So for the first time, they let us rack our bikes by the handlebars and not the seat because it was so windy and everything was blowing around.
Yeah.
And it went from, I was there for a few days. I was there for about a week and it went from, the mid 70s to like 40 degrees. And the water temperature was the day before the race. I believe it was like 65 and then it got as low as 62. So I know it went down about 3 degrees overnight. And if the race was the day before, I wouldn't have done it because of the wind and the rain and the chaotic conditions. I'm like, I don't think I can handle this because it was so cold and windy and rainy. But the water temperature was warm enough that I was not going to wear a wetsuit. But since it dropped the 3 degrees, I'm like, I'm wearing my wetsuit and I'm wearing a swimsuit under my wetsuit and I'm doing a complete change in transition. And I've been racing for 30 years and I've never done a complete change in transition in any race I've ever done. But because the air temperature to start was 45 degrees and the water temperature was so cold that I just knew when I got on the bike, I needed to have dry clothes on and just, manage my day and be as warm as I could. It was all about trying to stay warm for me. And so they had a little mini changing tent because this was still close to COVID in 2021. So they didn't have a complete changing tent. And it was about the size of an elevator. And my bike, thankfully, was right by the changing tent. So I grabbed my gear bag, went in, did a complete change, put a dry kit on. And I was still very cold for about 25 miles on the bike. And so a lot of this, I tell this story because it really is weather dependent. And so the weather blew in so quickly. For me, I drove down there and I told everyone I'm going to be prepared if it snows because there's been so many weather patterns hitting races unexpectedly. I'm like, it's going to snow in Florida. I'm just going to be prepared. So I was really prepared for every weather. Not everyone will be. It just depends when they get there and what happens to the weather the days leading up to it. And so generally, I recommend just wearing your kit under your wetsuit. And so when you're transitioning, you pull your wetsuit down. When you get near your bike, you completely peel off the wetsuit. They may have wetsuit strippers. They didn't the year I did it. And then you're going on your, there's less clutter and there's less things to do if you just have to take your wetsuit off, put your helmet, glasses, shoes, and bib number on and go. So it's whatever you're comfortable with, and just knowing if you do the complete change, it's going to add a few minutes to your overall transition time, which generally is no big deal.
I got a question here regarding wetsuits. Alterations, the pros and cons of wetsuit alterations. So if you have a full wetsuit, what are your thoughts on you personally as the athlete cutting the sleeves down or cutting the sleeves off, or maybe cutting them at the knees to give your calves, I don't know, less restrictions? And what does that do to compromise the wetsuit? Do you have any experience with that or any thoughts?
We talked about this on a podcast. We had a question from Kathy. And I've never done it. I've never had to do that because I've always had multiple wetsuits from partners that I've always had, like a sleeveless, a long sleeve, a short john where there's short legs and short arms. So I've never really had to, I've always had the wetsuit to use depending on the water temperature. I think it's pretty common though, because I looked it up online. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's pretty common for athletes to maybe cut the legs. I've never heard of an athlete cutting off the arms of a long sleeve to make it a sleeveless. I would if I did something like that, my sister does alterations. I'd want her to do it for me because she has the alteration type of experience to know how she would need to make other changes and not, after you cut the sleeves off, where you're going to have to sew something up or make something tighter so it doesn't tear again at a different seam. I just don't know anything about it because I've never done it.
Yeah, I'm wondering what it does to compromise, leaking or tearing through the race. Is that big of a deal if you were to go and keep your full wetsuit but cut it off with the knees down? Would that make that much of a flotation disadvantage for you, or would it bother
I
the
don't think that,
flotation?
yeah, I don't think cutting the knees down would have anything to do with flotation because your legs are still going to float because
Yeah.
the kick comes mostly from the hips anyways. So if
Hmm.
you still have the thighs covered and the hips covered, your hips are going to stay up. Also, specifically for Ironman Florida, I wore my husband's men's large wetsuit. So
Hmm.
there's a big opening in the armpit area. And it was very big that I was standing in line with my arms tucked underneath my chest in the wetsuit because it was that big on me to keep my
Wow.
arms warm. But I knew because I practiced this the day before, I knew how high to hike the legs up and to
Mhm.
keep it as constricted against my body. So when I took the dive and the plunge in the water, it didn't fill up with water. And even though it had very large openings in the armpit area, it didn't fill up with water. So it didn't make me cold. I wasn't cold because my wetsuit filled up with water. Because I've also worn other brands of wetsuits where they've been too big, where they have filled up with water and kind of dragged me down. Like I felt the weight of
Mm.
the water in this, too large of a wetsuit that had sleeves on,
Mhm.
and the water couldn't escape. It filled up and it just couldn't escape because I had sleeves. But with a sleeveless wetsuit,
Yeah.
if any water got in, it would be able to escape. But like I said, I knew how to fit it to my body that it would be constricting, and I knew how to dive in so it wouldn't fill up because I practiced.
Yeah, because it would fill up through your neck, right?
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
So good question. And on that note, Blue 70 outlet store is blowing out wetsuits right now at great prices. They're like 60% off on the Blue 70 outlet store. I
Oh.
posted this in our Monday newsletter, and I actually finally just got myself a small Blue 70 sleeveless wetsuit, and I don't have to wear my husband's anymore.
But you don't have anything on the schedule. You just want to. You got a good deal on it. You want to get it and just kind
Yeah.
of file it away in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. This question from Daniel. Hi, Wendy. I just purchased your couch to Ironman training program made easy. I signed up for Ironman 70.3 Tulsa on May 21st, and if all goes well, I'd like to try Ironman Wisconsin in September. Is it possible to adjust the schedule accordingly?
Thank you for purchasing our plan, Daniel. And I followed up with him because I'm not quite sure exactly what he means by adjusting the schedule. So when you do purchase a training plan on Training Peaks, what I always recommend is that you load the program to end on the date of your race. And so in his case, it's an Ironman plan. I suggested that he load it to end on, I think it was September 10th, whatever that Ironman Wisconsin date is. And then it's going to load. It's a 32-week plan. So I'm not quite sure. I didn't do the calculations where his Ironman 70.3 Tulsa event lands on. And so I think he probably was also wanting to know if he starts following this Ironman plan now
Mhm.
and ends up doing the Tulsa 70.3, can he maybe reuse the Ironman plan for the actual Ironman? And the answer is yes. Once you buy a plan on Training Peaks, you can apply it and unapply it anytime you want to different dates because you own the plan. So you can recycle the plan and use it multiple times if you wanted to. So hopefully
So,
that answered his question.
so if you have an intermediate Ironman plan that's 24 weeks, for example, you could just back time it to whatever race you want every year and just make your own adjustments.
Yes, and if you make your own adjustments, you can switch the workouts around. If you have a premium Training Peaks account, you can drag and move the workouts. So if the swim is scheduled on a Wednesday and you can't swim on a Wednesday, you can drag and drop the swim to the day that you want to complete the swim on. That is with a premium account. But all plans, you can have a basic free account if you wanted to, and you didn't want to spend that little bit of money to get the upgrade to a premium account.
Okay.
And, just so he knew, all our plans include suggested races leading up to the full in his case. So within the plan, within the first 16 weeks, we build you up, maybe the first 12 weeks, we build you up to actually running a half marathon. And then we build you up to do a half Ironman or two before the full Ironman. So we try to include dates that we suggest you do a race, but obviously no one's life and plan is perfect, that you can adjust the plan and insert a race. Instead of doing those weekend workouts, you can do a race instead.
And we'll finish off with one more question. This is from Kathleen, who also purchased one of our plans. This is the Couch to 70.3 plan, all found on Training Peaks. And the plan is to start in December, leading up to Chattanooga 70.3 in 2023. What do you recommend she do in the meantime to prepare her to start the plan? How does she modify the schedule, for example, if she can only swim on Wednesdays and weekend days, and so on?
Again, thank you, Kathleen, for purchasing our plan. So, she's got about a month or so. I don't know what time in December she's starting the plan. There's a few ideas. Number one, you can just maybe start the plan and repeat the first month. So you do the first month now, and then you do the first month again when it actually starts. Our plan is 24 weeks. Or you can work on your limiter. So if you're a weaker swimmer, start doing some extra swimming now. Send me a swim video and run video for analysis so you can get that taken care of. Make sure you know how you're going to bike. Are you going to bike in? Do you have a bike, first of all? So make sure you get that squared away. Are you going to be biking indoors? Are you using a smart trainer or an old trainer? Are you going to be using a Peloton? Are you going to be taking spin classes? So just kind of, not just starting to train right now, but just to kind of look ahead and organize your schedule and making sure you have the tools needed for success, especially we're approaching winter, and it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to train in the winter time because you may not be outside depending on where you live. And so making sure you have a way to do strength training. Are you planning on doing in-home body weight or movements with dumbbells and barbells and machines? Are you going to join a health club? I recently spoke to an athlete who was waiting to join a health club until his plan started. And he found out he's a very weak swimmer, and he probably should have started swimming a few months ago to learn how to swim, but he didn't want to invest in a health club until he was actually starting the plan. So just looking, you own the plan, you purchased it already, you can look ahead and start watching some videos and kind of educating yourself on the layout of the plan and how to just set yourself up for success. But to start with, get that swim and run video to me to give you an analysis and making sure you're working on your technique limiters and just staying active, right now, depending on how active you've been up until this point. So there's a lot of, it depends. And then as far as, adjusting your schedule, the way our plans are set up is generally a hard day followed by an easy day. So if you're gonna, or a bike day followed by swim day, run day followed by a swim day. So if you're gonna flip flop days and you can't swim on the days that I scheduled them within the plan, you can just flip flop and bike instead and swim on your bike day and do that. And again, if you have the premium Training Peaks account, you can slide and drag and drop any workout to any day you want of the week. Just try to balance the hard day, easy day concept, and you'll be fine.
Big thanks to Kathleen, Daniel, Jenny, Scott, Jason, and Ann for our questions today for today's podcast. You can always send a question to Wendy at t2coaching.com or t2coachwendy at gmail.com. Okay. And also at the T2 Endurance Club on Facebook or anywhere you find us on social media. And we'll use those questions and use them for an upcoming podcast. Be sure to check out endurancehour.com to sign up for our newsletter because we have 2 newsletters that go out every week. One is strictly about discount codes that we have and that we hear about, so you can save on your triathlon and endurance gear. And then Thursday or Friday, we usually have a recap with some other great information from this week's podcast. That's on endurancehour.com. And one more thing about the cold plunge. Again, Dave 150 at checkout. Save $150 off your cold plunge. It's well worth it. So glad I got mine, and it's paying off already. I got 2.5 weeks left until my Ironman, and then I'd love to let you know how it all went and how it all worked out for this year. Any final notes about your week or what's coming up for you?
I'm just enjoying the fall. It's really beautiful here. We've had some cold weather, but it's pretty much fall weather, upper 60s, mid 70s. It's November. That's when the colors really start to change here in Georgia. That more of the reds come out, and it's just beautiful. So I'll be getting up in the northern Georgia mountains this weekend. I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited as well for you. And we see a lot of yellow and reds on our trees changing right now. It's beautiful fall/winter. And if you can make it down to Arizona, look for me. I'll be wearing my Timex gear for my kit, but I'll tell you more about that next week as I do my final week of prep before my race. For Coach Wendy, I'm Dave. Thanks for listening. Have a great week of training, racing, and recovery. We'll see you next time. Adios.
Adios.